He told us that we were going to be out of a job, that they're shutting the doors to this facility. And at that moment, I can remember very clearly experiencing like complete ego death.
Welcome everybody to the highs and lows of X's and O's. I'm your host, Dr. Hillary Cauthen, or as some of my clients like to call me, Dr. C. I'm a clinical sports psychologist based in Austin, Texas, and I've been in the field for over 17 years working with individual athletes, teams, and organizations in building their mental performance and wellness programs. My passion is to assist breaking down stigmas across communities, which is highlighted in my book, Hello Trauma, Our Invisible Teammate. This is your go-to podcast where we delve into the intricate dance between mental health, performance, and success. Every week, we explore the peaks and valleys while striving for success with the insights straight from top performers and elite athletes. Join us as we uncover their stories, challenges, and mental cheat code that could be a game changer for your performance playbook. Let's get started. I am beyond excited for our next guest. This episode is just going to be fire. I already know it, so be prepared to just have a lot of energy coming your way. Let me introduce you to Brianna Joy Garza, is a professional shooting coach, instructional designer, and owner of Shooter Shoot Training, which is a mentorship program that focuses on both shot and thought development, which is just the catchiest phrase you should remember. Brianna's Shooter Shoot is a hybrid year-round training and mentorship program where she travels the world providing athletes, youth to pro, with holistic human development and expert shot training. She is also the founder of Changing the Game, a 501c3 that hosts the only competitive women-led coach and player development conference at the Women's Final Four each year.
Yeah, that was awesome. Being that it was the first year we did Changing the Game, we did that together, and that's the first time I've ever heard it in an intro. So thanks for that.
So let's get started. I like to start with learning the play. So break it down to me about your youth sport experience, how you got involved in this competitive mindset and aspirational goals you have.
Well, I grew up in South Texas, South Central. My daddy was a football coach, and so my life looked a lot like, you ever seen Remember the Titans?
Yes.
Yeah, so the little girl growing up on the football field and Remember the Titans, that's like really spitting image of what my life looked like. So my dad always had keys to the gym. Basketball was my first love, but I did all sports, just being surrounded by a sporting family, sporting community. My mom was not an athlete. She actually went to a small school called Comfort High School in Comfort, Texas, and it was like a 1A where everybody makes the team. And her favorite story to share is how, they were picking teams for tennis, for doubles, because she went and tried out for tennis. And she said, the coach said, okay, Jerry, you get this spot, Helen, you get this spot, and Terry, you've made manager. And so my athleticism, I think, comes a lot from my dad. My grit, I think, comes a lot from my mom. So yeah, growing up in South Texas, Texas, I mean, it's a big sports state anyway. So had keys to the gym, grew up loving it. Basketball was my first love. It was the first thing that really challenged me and that I was good at. I was just naturally had a knack for it. I loved watching basketball. I would watch NBA on Sunday and then go to the side yard and like try to practice the moves. And so that's how my competitive spirit sort of started. And then my big brother, who's one of my heroes, he was like a thoroughbred athlete, quarterback, point guard. And I just looked up to him so much. And he would always let me play in the cul-de-sac with all of his high school buddies, right, when I was way too young to do that. And I didn't score a point for the first 3 years that I tried to play basketball because they didn't go easy on me. And because of that, I developed, I think, a lot of grit and a lot of like a chip on my shoulder, a little bit of arrogance and pride, like those stupid older boys. But I think that's what built a lot of the dog in me, was because I had to be.
Were there any influential moments during that time that made you want to keep pushing to be better at the game?
I mean, growing up as a young girl in youth sports, there's always going to be, I think, a little bit of jealousy, ball hog, situation. And so working through some of that, challenged by coaches that I had, experiences with coaches that I had as I got into high school, in middle school, they put me on C team in the 7th grade. And I was just so hurt by that. And I remembered that that was like one of the first moments where I decided that not getting picked first was not gonna get me down. Went to our very first game, the C team game, and it was still my career high. Was in that game. I had 52 points in that game, and I can remember girls guarding me being like, "Why is she on the C team?" And I'm like, "Yeah, good question, Chelsea. Why is she on the C team?" And so yeah, just I think like having those little pieces of being challenged or being told no or not scoring a bucket for 3 years because my big brother's friends wouldn't let me score a bucket. I think those little pieces were the things that challenged me, that brought me, over time, obviously, to the way I view challenges now.
And what were like coaches that you had, right? Are there any standout moments where a coach really impacted kind of the character development of yourself, like who you became and like instilled these lessons within you?
I think you and I are of the generation where coaching was just viewed a bit different. What a coach's job was, what a coach's role was. I think now there's a huge emphasis on psychological safety and the environment we create and what people believe about themselves. And back then it was almost the reverse. Like, let me see how I can break you down to see if you can overcome. And for most athletes, that didn't work. And with me, I had a coach my freshman year who told me I was never going to be good enough to play at the next level. And I just got lucky, I think, in that, however, my brain was developed or shaped or whatever, we don't really know where resilience comes from, outside of, a strong social circle and maybe little pieces of warming up your resilience. But instead of hearing that as, okay, well, I should just quit, I heard that as, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And yeah, there was this like moment where that whole experience came to an apex in the middle of a game. I made a couple of big mistakes. She pulls me out. The crowd gets quiet. I can hear her heels walking over to me on the floor, and she screams at me in front of this crowd full of people, and I have to run to the locker room crying, past my heroes, right, the varsity team. My mom's in the stands, and at that moment, like, I knew that I was gonna quit. And this is like one of those things where when you're young, you don't really realize the ripples of your behaviors or of your choices, of your actions, both the ones you make for yourself and the ones that either you make for others or that others around you make for you. And in that moment, I ran to the locker room. I'm crying, and unbeknownst to me, my hero at the time, her name was Lindy Kimbrough. I've caught up with her now and shared this story with her, but she followed me into the locker room and knelt down in front of me as I was just, hysterical, and she physically lifted my chin, and she was just like, "Brianna, don't you dare quit. Like, I'm so sorry this is happening to you, and promise me you're not going to quit. You're a great basketball player. I don't care what anybody else says. Like, don't stop doing this."
And I think the essence of that too is not everyone probably could have come out of that if they didn't have that social support, if they didn't have someone who stepped up for them and said, "Hey, like I got you, like you can do this."
1,000%.
Because the coaching voice, what I think coaches don't understand, especially at the middle school and high school level, these players are playing for their coach, right? They see them as a parental figure. It's a part of just, I want to please you. And it's natural, it's instinctual. They're children that are playing a game and taking feedback from authority. That's socially how we've been prescribed to learn. And I don't think coaches have the realization of the impact of the words, of how that actually sits with the feelings. And grateful you had an experience for someone who could stand up and say, "Hey, like, we got you. We've been through this. You're great. Go do this." Not everyone would have had that same experience.
It's really hard to be a good coach. It's really, really hard to be a good coach. It takes so much thought and care and self-work and all of these things. And, you know, we're in a climate, especially in the United States, where we really just let anybody put on a hat and be a coach. And sometimes it's great, and oftentimes it's not. It's funny, I was just in Canada, running a couple of camps and events. And did you know that most youth coaches in Canada are volunteers? But every single one of them are required to have certifications, like several of them, in order to become then a volunteer coach. Where in the States, we pay coaches, we hire coaches for prep schools and these, all of these things. and they just have to have played basketball at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And
Or maybe not.
so I think, or maybe not, or maybe not.
I mean, we could go in a realm of the coaching education development and the harm that we cause. Hopefully we're on a trend to get it better,
Let's
hopefully.
pivot. Let's pivot. You're right. You're right.
But I do think that the essence there too is the fact that coaches' voices impact athletes' mental health. No matter how we want to look at it, good, bad, it impacts them, and we have to take responsibility to be better for the athletes.
Yeah, we're the adult that spends the most time with athletes or with children other than their parents a lot of the time in their development of who they become.
Before we dive into kind of this transition of like your aspiring, I can't wait to share some stories about your coaching and the things you're doing. Like, talk to me a little bit about this transition for your dreams that you had playing, how that navigated, the highs that you experienced through that, and maybe some resilient moments as an athlete before you transition professionally into coaching.
Yeah, so I always had aspirations to play in college. It's funny, I never thought I was going to be a pro. I've always had huge dreams, but I've always been quite realistic with the fact that I'm 5'6" and I can't move sideways. Like, I always just knew that about myself. I was always very skilled because I cared. I just got in the gym. I loved it. And so, throughout high school, I knew I wanted to play college ball. I didn't get a scholarship offer until my senior year. To a small school in the Midwest, in NAIA, and then got there, went to that school, had another pretty terrible experience with a coach, ended up transferring, and went to a JUCO where we went to the JUCO national tournament. And at that JUCO, we had 4 days in preseason. Like waking up at 6 a.m. for weights. At 7:15 we had skills. At 8 o'clock we had pickup, and then we'd go to class, and then at 1 p.m. we'd do our conditioning or some shape of that. 4 days a week we were doing 4 days. I came out of JUCO, Hillary, just stacked. I was like 165, like perfect rectangle, like walking through doors. And so then I made it to the JUCO national tournament. That's where my final school, Baker, found me. And at Baker, had a great playing experience. My junior year, I went and we had our first 20-win season in the last like 15 years. And so I told everybody, I'm going to be conference player of the year next year. And so then when you say something out loud like that to that many people, like you have no option. You have to go put the work in. And so I really discovered my sacrifice and my discipline that year. And that was the first summer that I got introduced to truly some of the concepts in sports psychology. I did a sports psychology internship that summer. I stayed on campus and I read The Inner Game of Tennis. And that book by W. Timothy Galway, who was not a sports psychologist, just a tennis pro that was an absolute genius, changed everything about the way I thought about my own reps, the way I thought about my mistakes, my misses, my makes, everything. How I viewed my own development completely shifted in my head, and it like unlocked this ability of neutral thinking during games, and a very like being able to have emotional reps during practice, because if you don't practice the same emotions that you're going to feel in games, you're not going to perform the same in games. And so I really got into my bag as far as like how I was thinking differently about my reps. So I didn't come the next year bigger, faster, stronger than like 1 year before, but my mindset had shifted. And so that year we lost our very first conference game, and then we won 19 in a row to have the very first conference championship in our school's history. We went to the national tournament, first time in school history. After the tournament, I'm driving home in my Dodge Ram pickup. There's cows on the right side of me, and my coach calls me and he said, "Brianna, I know how bad you wanted player of the year, and I'm sorry, but you were unanimously voted. Every coach in the conference picked you." And I was like, so you only have to feel something like that happen once to then start believing like, okay, I really can do the things that I say I'm going to do. I just have to let it be hard.
Anyone who's listening who's experienced that or has like this aspirational goal and like puts it out in the universe and then gets it to have happen, like cherish that moment, because sitting here I can like imagine you in your car and just feeling that, and I just hope everyone can be like, yep, I want that, or I had that, and take back that moment, because that's powerful and it leads to so many other things that we can go do. I think where I want to shift for your high pressure play, because it's so interesting, and your story about the coaching dynamic you went to, and specifically the niche you have as a shooting and instructional coach, right? It's very different. It's a different challenge, but I want you to talk about how you got into this, and that component of what you were doing at that point, and then what has led a year and a half later.
In 2021, so my background was always in, my master's, my bachelor's was in psych. My master's was in sport and performance psych with, my emphasis was in skill acquisition and skill adaptation. And then I got another master's degree in instructional design and human performance technology. And really my initial goal was I want to be a player development coach at the college level. And then I got that job I got a job as a GA, and then I resigned at semester because there just wasn't any joy in the gym. And that's just a non-negotiable for me. And so 2021 that happened, and Brett was right, like in the middle of, I guess that was late 2020, right in the middle of COVID. And in Phoenix, Arizona, where it was the Wild West, and they were like, "What's COVID?" They opened up a gym during that time with the company that I was working for. They were opening an on-site facility, so I didn't have anything tying me back to the Midwest where I was. So I picked up and just moved. I was in the U-Haul when I called the gym, and I said, "Yo, I'm on my way. You can hire me or not." And yeah, got there, and it's funny, it's interesting. This was the very first time in my life as a woman in this space where I can remember very clearly owning my own voice, because I was sitting across from four men who were hiring me for this position, and they were making it sound like they were going to put me like at the front desk, like the admin type of position. And I remember looking at all of them across from me and being like, I intend to be a trainer here. And then being like, okay, like you're gonna be a trainer then, And so then I developed that, and that was supposed to be a 3-year gig. And in that year of 2021, 3 very tumultuous things happened to me. The third of which was losing that job that was supposed to be a 3-year gig. They shut the doors. And to get everybody's foot in the door that first 8 months, 9 months while we were trying to build clientele, the way we got people's foot in the door was we had to give free 30-minute shooting workouts. And so I had to figure out how to make somebody feel like a better shooter in 30 minutes, which is really, really difficult to do. And so I just started studying it like a mad scientist. I already sort of had the background in teaching methods, right? With feedback scheduling, motor behavior, how we schedule our reps, variable reps versus block practice. Like I already had that background in skill acquisition, skill adaptation. So then once I really started studying shooting, I was like fascinated with it. It was just something that never, even now, like I could talk about shooting all day. And I think part of it's the science and the physics and the all of that, but the other part of it is like how clearly the connection to confidence that shooting has. When you feel somebody in front of you have that aha moment where something clicks for them and they make 6, 7, 8 shots in a row for the first time in their lives, and you feel that energy of like they glow right in front of you, and you're like, oh my gosh, you get to be a piece of that. And there's such a small scale, making baskets, the stupid orange ball. And so I got really, really into that, really good at it, started building a brand, and then started just having the audacity to call myself a shooting specialist. And then in October of that year, our CEO flew down, and he did it all in the right way. There was no bad blood, but he told us that we were going to be out of a job, that they're shutting the doors to this facility. And that was the third tumultuous thing that had happened in like a 6-month period, like life-altering, life-changing things. And at that moment, I can remember very clearly experiencing like complete ego death. Like that was it. and I that was a 6 a.m. meeting that he called, and I had a 14-hour day of training
Wow.
that day. And I remember going down into the gym. This was the trenches, right? When you're a player development coach, this is just how it works. And so I remember getting down to the gym to start my session, with my first athlete that day, and I remember that entire day just having the most fun,
Hmm.
just the whole day. I mean, because I couldn't obviously share that the business was going under. Um, but then, yeah, about 10 o'clock that night, I ride my scooter home from the gym, and I sit on my front porch and had a good cry. And then, yeah, I just had this moment where I was just sort of reflecting, meditating, breathing, and the idea hit me like a Mack truck, shoot or shoot. And so I grabbed my laptop and got on Canva, made my first, like, this was the first like flagship design that I made. And there's a story behind the logo. We can talk about it if we have time. But yeah, my roommate got home from study hall. She was a college player. I showed her. I just started as a t-shirt brand. And she was like, "Oh my God, that's sick! I'm gonna get one." She goes to bed. She has to be up early at 5:30 for morning practice the next day. And when she leaves the house, I'm still outside on the front porch, just building. I think the first step was just deciding to call myself a shooting coach.
You could have applied for a different job, right? But you chose to bet on yourself, right? And I love the aspect when I hear shoot or shoot, like I also just think of that like I'm betting on myself, right? I'm taking my shot. I'm going to do it. And I think it's beautiful because you didn't take an easy path. Like you chose to say I'm creating this for myself, and it's unconventional. And I think the story you share when you're traveling internationally and you're having these camps, right? Like people don't do that. Like what in you allows you to be living a nomadic style and going international into new cultures and doing the craft you love?
It's not about me, you know. I think I had this moment when I realized like just none of it is about me. Like what, like we're only here for other people. That's just a philosophy of self, a philosophy that I believe in. It's not necessarily the right one or the wrong one or whatever, but like I imagine myself in a world alone, and that just like what would I even do with my time, right? Like it would seem I would be bored. And so understanding we're only here for other people, and that selfishly impacting and serving other people just makes me, it just fills my cup. It makes me feel warm on the inside. And so, the traveling and the impacting these young people or these coaches in other cultures, this sacrifice, or what other people might see as a sacrifice is like actually quite selfish of me. Like, yo, this just makes me feel good
Right, right.
about what I do, about myself. And um, it really it ain't a bad life. It's not forever, right? 823 days on the road has never been dull. I'll tell you that. But there are definitely some challenges to it. It can be lonely. But this whole thing isn't about me. It's like in shooting, it isn't what I teach. Like I teach people how to believe in themselves through this medium of shooting, because at some point you're going to decide that, like, you're just going to decide to believe in this thing that you're doing, or you're not. And that's, I think, the difference between people who succeed at the things that they do and people who struggle, is because at some point you do have to make this very scary shift in your brain to say like, no, I can do that thing, and I'm just going to let it be hard. Like that's been a real theme of, I think, this entire journey has just been let it be hard. Like, not there's not a lot of people who will just let it be hard for a sustained period of time. And if you can, I mean, that's what grit is, right? We talk
Right.
about Angela Duckworth, and she said if you can just like do something really hard and try something for 2 3 years at a time without seeing it pay off, like those are the people who succeed. And so tying that all into shooting a stupid orange ball, is a very fulfilling way of being.
And I'm going to give you a nice assist here because obviously I know you and know the things you do, but because you don't have a traditional season and there's no like out of season time, and we know coaches are never having an off season. I call it out of season because they're doing so much recruiting and other work. You're pretty intentional of when you're taking breaks and what you do. And so I want you to share a little bit about like what is a reset that you do where you're not actually working.
A reset that I do. Yeah, I'll go find so a way that I stayed on the road like this for so long, especially at the beginning of this journey, is I would go pick up dog sits. That's why I was in Sweden. Whenever Dr. Hillary and I met, I'll go pick up dog sits anywhere in the world, and I'll just hang out with dogs. And sometimes find business where I'm at and go to a gym and do that. But that helped me afford to live on the road, and I got to hang out with dogs. And so I'm just waiting for somebody to create some sort of like adopt a dog for a day situation, like where I could go rent your dog, and then just hang out and all day or for a week or whatever. Um, but that's one way, and then another way is if I'm going on a break or going to visit a friend or going on vacation or whatever it is, like I will spend that week and I will like very minimally. I will let my team know this is what I'm doing, and my team's like, "Oh my god, turn your phone off, shut it down." That like so my team has my back in that way too. And so I'll be intentional about going somewhere with somebody I really care about. My best friend Jasmine, who spoke with us at the conference, also most recently, she and I just took a girls' trip to Miami, and just enjoyed each other and got to have the conversations like that are deep friendship conversations, and not to worry about work or showing up somewhere, doing anything, and not having a schedule on those days where I'm just taking a break. Like I don't write a schedule for myself. I just allow myself to be. So that's one way I reset, inside of all of these days.
I love it. And I love you brought up the dogs. Like one of our other episodes, we talk about the importance about how dogs have in our mental health and the joy and the connection. And it's true and it's real. And, maybe you're not a dog person, like maybe like cats, but
Yeah.
we like dogs, but
Right.
if it's
Well,
not
yeah,
people,
cats are nice.
finding something that can connect to you, that
Yeah.
just has energy and different presence. All right. So you defined yourself as a shooting coach, right? Which is audacious, as you like to say too, because I know that's one of your words. But
Yeah.
when did you feel, because we all go through the imposter syndrome and we're like, oh, okay, I'm doing this. But when did you have a moment where you're like, oh, shoot, I'm making it now?
It was a client of mine named Paris, and Paris is doing her own thing now. She's graduated, and she's like a fitness coach now. It's great. But Paris, when she came to me, was 16 years old and was like really into lifting. She was very strong, but she couldn't make a 3-pointer. And this was still at the beginning of my career. Like if I could help her, if I could go back and help her now, it would take me 20 minutes. But then it took me like 3 weeks because we were just figuring this thing out together. So we'd been working diligently at helping her understand her power generation. I'd studied film. I had a meeting with a physics professor. Like, how do we make this work? And I remember the day where we turned on the shooting machine, and I said, Paris, we're just gonna try it. Or I'm just gonna put you behind the 3-point line. We're gonna see what's up. And so start the machine, and she takes a couple shots. She misses her first 3. Okay, just short. Okay, and then her 4th one went in. And then she kind of glances over at me, and I don't say anything, right? I just pretend like I'm not freaking out on the inside. And then she takes her 5th shot. Fifth one goes in. 6th one goes in. 7th one goes in. She cashes like 8 in a row. 8-3. She never made a 3-pointer in a high school game before. And so I'm like, oh my God, like, is this working? That was the first moment where I was like, okay, all right, like I'm maybe kind of good at this. And then from there, about 6 or 8 months later is when I met Emma Cannon, who was my WNBA client. She was the first pro player to really believe in me, which when you have somebody who plays at the highest level think that you have something, then you start to believe that too. And we did great work with Emma. We took her from being ranked in the bottom of the league in her catch and shoot to leading the entire league in her catch and shoot, which is something I carry with me always, in the confidence and in the belief that I have in this craft. And then, at some point shooting like if NASA can figure out how to put a man on the moon, like I can certainly figure out the formula to shooting a basketball, right? That's the science piece of it. The art piece of it is the way that we teach. the care that we put into teaching. And so I think because of I accidentally went to school for 8 years after high school to become a shooting coach. Those things just married quite well together.
Yeah. And I do want to spend some time on that because you are brilliant behind the scenes of it, right? Like I think part of the presence of why the magic happens is who you are and the energy you bring and the care and the psychological safety. But there's so much like scientific detail that you're a learner of this craft. And that needs to be true for those. Anything we do, we have to learn and we have to lean in and we have to ask questions. And your whole story, you're sharing all the moments of you've asked this expert, you've called this person, you've connected here, and you also care, and I want to spend some time on that mental piece and the thought development side of like what are your core pillars of creating a psychologically safe environment.
You'll never hear me go to an athlete and say, hey, these are the things we have to change. Um, because even using those, like, even using the word change is like athletes put like, I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of reps into figuring out what their shot feels like. And their shot is so, their performance as a shooter is so closely tied into their like confidence, right? And what they believe about themselves. And so I um, do not ever say like here's what you need to change about your shot. What I say is, hey, like your shot is yours. It's not going to look like mine. It's not going to look like anybody else's. We walk different, we talk different, we got different DNA, we move a little bit different, but I'm just going to make it feel easier for you just based on laws of physics, right? Because physics don't change. So your shot's still going to be look like yours, just like Steph doesn't look like Clay when he shoots, and Clay doesn't look like Jason Tatum when he shoots, and
Right.
Jason Tatum doesn't look like Nikola Jokic, right? Those are all they're all great performers, right? Great shooters, but it's going to be yours. And so that's like one of the techniques I use to just kind of help them let their guard down, and let them, because having somebody, kind of come in and toy with this thing you've spent so much time on, it can be a scary space. But I find that if you approach it like that, like, hey, your shot's still going to be yours. Like, I'm not going to change it into something else. We're just going to help you make it feel easier. Even framing it like that has been really powerful in helping athletes receive instruction, and then being able to explain it with data, right? With
Yeah.
science. Like, I'm not reinventing the wheel. Like, these things are true about your biomechanics, about physics, right? About the laws of gravity, about simplicity, right? And I've spent so much time thinking about those things that I'm so confident I can explain them to a 6-year-old.
And if you were to give these athletes like a mental cheat code, right? Where you're like, if I'm going to leave you with this little nugget, this cheat code that's going to help your performance or help you in life, like what would you give them?
Picking one thing at a time to get better at, and inside of that, understanding when you make your mistake regarding that one thing, and then just adjusting it the next rep. So there's a phrase for that called deliberate practice, and this is what I'm building into my shooter shoot training app that we're hoping to release this December. Is I'll assign athletes their one thing for the day. This is your main focus: just keeping good hands on the ball, just keeping your eyes locked in on your target, moving the ball at the same speed from start to finish, moving the ball in a straight line, right? That's the one thing I'm going to get better at, this micro skill inside of the macro skill in shooting. And even if I miss, if I knew I moved the ball in a straight line, or I moved the ball at the same speed from start to finish, or I kept my eyes locked in, or whatever the one thing is for that day, then that rep is still a victory for me because I'm getting better at this one
Yeah.
micro skill inside of the macro skill. And then it's teaching them like to study themselves instead of judging themselves upon their misses. Doesn't mean you can't feel. Like, I've punted mini basketballs, in my day. Doesn't mean you can't feel frustration or emotion or whatever. I think we tend to push that away from athletes when we really should just let them experience it. But it does mean that we don't let our frustration dictate our next actions. We just study ourselves instead of judging ourselves. So that would be, I think, my cheat code is picking one thing, and then knowing just if I mess that one thing, just adjust it the next rep. That's where mastery lives in there. And the only way to do all of that is just to study yourself from rep to rep instead of judging yourself for the result.
I love it. I love it. And as we're concluding, right, for kind of this next phase, you have so many stuff, but when I talk about kind of plans for the future, like, and your legacy and what you'd like to leave, like, talk to us about what is the message and legacy you want to leave in the sport community, in the shooting world, and what you're doing.
There's an advantage to letting yourself struggle at something. And shooting is a really safe space to experience that. Um, because struggles will always shape us. And so if we can learn to just understand our mistake and then fix it the next rep, what that's going to translate to in the long run is going to be much more important in our relationships, right? In our jobs, in the things that matter to us. You'll make a mistake in a relationship, and you'll just study that instead of judging yourself for it, and you'll just adjust it the very next rep. And this is how we build, and this is how we grow in any discipline, not just in shooting.
Yeah. And I love it because if anyone's shot a basketball in a gym and you spent hours in there trying to do it, or even if you went in for like 10 minutes and you walked away because you weren't doing it, like there's so many parallels of life and basketball, right? Especially with shooting only, right? And I think I'm putting myself in a gym being like, man, how many times did I give up because I just wasn't having it that day, versus living in the hard, as you keep saying, and just being in the hard and learning, being like, okay, I want to end on like the next, I'm going to end on a shot that's in, right? And how many times have you stayed in there to end on a make, and we all do that if we've gone in and played the game, but that's so applicable to everything that we're doing. Is like, I love this message you gave us of like living in the hard and not giving up on yourself and like ending on the make, because throughout all of your hard lows that you've had, there's so many beautiful, resilient highs from that because you stuck with it. And I love it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's cool to know you. I'm honored. Madam President. We out here.
So how can we stay up to date on what you're doing?
Shooters X Shoot 70 is my Instagram for my business as a shooting coach, because 70% or better gets you the green light. And then Changing the Game Final Four is the account for the new, for our conference that we run every year. And Changing the Game itself, I've shifted it into a nonprofit organization, so we're going to be able to support women who are up and coming coaches and helping them facilitate gym space, paying for their gym space for their first camps that they're going to run. We're going to put up a community for coaches all over the country to be able to join, and their community membership will count as a tax deductible donation to be as a part of that community. We'll have courses. Our presentations from last year are going to be held there at half price to, if you're in the community, to anybody who's just going to buy it, over the world. But everything about all of that is going to go straight into the nonprofit organization that's going to support my mission of empowering the women who are leading this next generation of sport. And wow, I've never said that out loud until now, and that sounds pretty cool. I'm excited about it. Okay.
We're changing the game, and I am honored to be your teammate, to be beside you, behind you, just helping you. And so thank you so much for today. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the highs and lows of X's and O's. I hope today's episode has equipped you with another mental cheat code to help you navigate your own highs and lows in pursuit of your success. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear next. Until next time, stay curious, compassionate, and courageous.